let's talk about this. Republican Congressman from Texas also, Lance Gooden. Lance, it's great to have you here. Thank you, sir. Congressman, appreciate it. And like I said with Cicilline, not here to blame you. I'm here for help. So I haven't heard them with this kind of desperation before. You've been to the border, you live there, you work it. I've been there. 72 hours is a big number for them. They're not supposed to hold kids 0 to 12 years of age that long. They got 250 of them. They go to HHS, they say, please take the kids. HHS says, we can't. Not that they don't. This is nothing about malice. Why can nothing be done? Cicilline says we got to talk about the rules. We gave them 470. They've asked for more money, but we got to talk about it and how to... Why isn't the emergency part coming through?
Part of the reason we're in this situation is because Republicans and Chris Cuomo are the only people that will admit we've even got a problem. Up until the last few weeks, Democrats wouldn't even acknowledge we have a problem on the border. I would go down to the border and talk with people who say, some of the people who live there, they'd say, we don't have a border security problem. We don't need a wall. We don't need to close the border. And then I'd say, well, what about all these children that are here? We've got to do something. We have a humanitarian crisis. And it's frustrating as a freshman congressman to see my colleagues who campaign across the aisle saying, we're going to come to Washington, we're going to work across the aisle, we're going to get something done for the American people, only to see that we've only passed 17 bills jointly as a Congress since January 1st. 5 of those bills had to do with the government shutdown. The rest of them were naming Bob Dole a colonel, naming a post office.
These are important, but not the big ticket items.
Yeah, it's just very frustrating.
So what do you do? Because look, you're new to the game, but people put you in a position of trust. It is fair game for you to say, it's not us, it's them. We've been all about the border. Pushback is, yeah, you've been all about the fence. And the men and women down there were saying, we're not a fence away from fixing this. I'm not against physical barriers on the border. I think they have their place. I certainly don't think they're immoral. What's immoral is ignoring the rest of this equation. And what I don't get is, what is missing in terms of, Lance, but also up the food chain of people saying, we have to do something about this right now. Bring in, we say we can walk and chew gum, bring in Azar from HHS, bring in the new DHS acting guy, and say, what do you need right now, specific and targeted, and how do we do that? Is it something the president could do with the emergency declaration? Why isn't that happening?
It's something that could be done with the emergency declaration, but such a huge problem down in Washington is the fact that Democrats will not agree to anything if it, in the slightest way, means it'll win for Donald Trump. And everything is so toxic. You saw what happened this week between him and Speaker Pelosi. Everything is so toxic. There's such a lack of desire on the part of Democrats in the House to do anything that might just in the slightest way offer up a victory.
So why don't you put it forward yourself and then do it as a shame campaign? Here's my bill, here's my idea.
I think it's a great idea.
I'm going to do it, and if you don't do it, then that's fine, but it's on you.
Sure. Yes, just yesterday with respect to border security, I filed a bill that dealt with sanctuary cities to reignite that campaign to do away with those. It works in conjunction with the president's immigration plan. But what we're seeing
legit part, but that's not going to decide whether or not a kid being held in custody is going to die or not.
We've got to spend more money on border security, and that includes with Homeland down on the border. That's one of the reasons Chip Roy blew the place up, so to speak, today in the House. I don't necessarily agree with harming the families that are along the floodplain areas in Iowa, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas. People are suffering now.
But they weren't going to check. They weren't going to get a check cut this weekend anyway.
Well, we're now going to delay that for another 10 days when we get back to Washington because we're off all next week. So I don't know that I agree with that outcome. I don't know that this will solve the problem. But to talk about business as usual being a problem for members of the freshman class, I think is important.
So you're in there, you're new. You got to be careful what fights you choose. That's a political reality. You say, hey, we got to find ways to work together. What's going on with Pelosi and the president? Fair point. The idea of moving on from Mueller, I see as a premise for that. Put Mr. Mueller in the chair. Let all of us hear him. Why did you leave obstruction the way you did? Is there something there for you guys to look at?
We would love for Mueller to be in front of a House and Senate committee, answering questions from both sides.
Can I hear it too, though, or does it have to be private?
I think you can hear it. Yes, absolutely.
Because he's saying that we're hearing that he says he wants to keep it private.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, we've got Democrats complaining about these redactions in the report that Andy Barr put out, and now suddenly we're okay with Mueller coming and setting his own terms for testifying. Why should he?
Well, I don't know that they're okay with it. The question is the DOJ doing it? But don't you think that if Mueller were to come in and say, look, here's why I said it the way I said it, and he undersells it, All right, well, there goes the air out of the balloon for the Democrats. I mean, if Mr. Mueller says he doesn't think there's a lot more there, he's the one who put the Congress verbiage in his report. And if he says, yeah, I think you should pursue these two things, then it shifts the onus to the president and say, if you want full cooperation on the FISA things, I'm a journalist, I'm happy to see the FISA application. If you want cooperation there, give cooperation here, let them have their hearings, and then they'll be held to account at the polls. If it's a fishing expedition, if it's overreach instead of oversight, they will feel the bite of the voter.
Everything you're saying is the reason Nancy Pelosi wants to keep her far-left progressive base of her voting bloc that keeps her in office. She wants to make sure that they're not talking impeachment. When she hears impeachment from her far-left portions of her caucus, she gets worried because she knows that impeachment is a losing argument for the Democrats. And we on the Republican side are saying, keep talking about impeachment, but we're not going to get anything done, and the voters are going to punish you for it next election.
But then why don't you work on this third way, right? You got left, right, and you got reasonable. Reasonable here is put Mueller in the chair, let him speak to the American people, and let him say, here's why I left it the way I did. Here's what I think matters and doesn't.
I think that's a great idea. But if you think that the Democrats who are running these committees are going to listen to what he says and then say, let's move forward for the American people, like we thought they might do when that report came out, then I don't think
But this message, having the AG set loose to cherry pick things that they can find in a FISA application, that's not going to help what you want to see.
Well, your last guest said there's all this national security implication. The Attorney General redacted things that were important to national security from that Mueller report that he gave to Congress. So if we trusted him to, which I do, to redact things that are important to national security, then I believe he's not going to throw a bunch of national secrets out there in this investigation.
That's the hope,
as well.
but he hasn't made himself a fair broker to this point, and people have questions about him, and that's going to be a concern.
That's an opinion I don't share.
And I understand that. But you're going to deal with it going forward, and I look forward to having the conversations with you.
Thank you so much.
All the best. And please, let me know what you think you can get done on this issue. I'm happy to blow it up on my show on a nightly basis.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Happy Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, honor the fallen, and
Thank
thank
you.
you.